Room 13. If you ever hear something being dragged slowly down a hallway at midnight, never open your door. Don't peek. Don't ask who's out there. Because the only reason that sound stops right outside your door is because it knows you're listening. This is the story of Room 13, the room that made its last 3 tenants move out in under a week. And this is the story of why I became the 4th tenant who never got the chance to leave. The move-in. My name is Bima. Back then I was a final year college student, buried in my thesis, and my wallet was basically empty. So when I found a cheap boarding house on the edge of town, way below market price, I didn't think twice. I went to check it out that same day. The place was old. The paint was faded. Moss crept up a few corners of the walls, but it still looked sturdy enough. The owner, Mrs. Yanti, was a middle-aged woman, friendly enough, but her eyes never quite seemed to focus on me when we talked, like she was always thinking about something else. There was only one room available, at the far end of the 2nd floor hallway, room 13. "It's the biggest room here," Mrs. Yanti said, holding up the key. "But it's quiet. Nobody wants it because it's all the way at the end." Honestly, that sounded perfect to me. A final year student like me needed somewhere quiet to grind through my thesis. I signed that same day. But before I headed upstairs with my bags, Mrs. Yanti grabbed my arm. Gently, but firm enough to stop me in my tracks. "The warning. One rule," she said. Her voice dropped, almost to a whisper. "If you hear something being dragged down the hallway after midnight, never try to peek outside." I laughed a little. I figured it was just some gimmick to make the place sound more memorable. Plenty of landladies like to spook new tenants so they don't cause trouble or bring people over. "Why, ma'am? What's going on?" Mrs. Yanti just shook her head. "Just listen to me. If you hear that sound, shut your door tight, turn off the lights, and don't make a sound until it's gone." I was still laughing it off in my head, but one thing did catch my attention. Her hand, the one gripping my arm, was cold. And it was the middle of a hot afternoon. I carried my stuff up to room 13. The room really was spacious, just like she'd promised. There was a small window facing the back alley, an old wooden wardrobe, and a single bed that clearly hadn't been replaced in years. What struck me as odd was the door next to mine, room 12, padlocked from the outside. Not just locked, padlocked, with a big, rusted padlock. I didn't ask about it. Not my business, I figured. I fell asleep fast that night, exhausted from moving. I had no idea that would be the last peaceful night's sleep I'd get in that room. The first night, 12:15 a.m., I woke up, not from a nightmare, not from noise outside. I woke up because there was a sound outside my room, a sound I couldn't quite place, like a wet cloth being dragged slowly across a wooden floor. Drag, stop, drag again. I froze in bed, eyes wide open, heart starting to race. My brain scrambled for a logical explanation. Maybe a cat, maybe another tenant mopping the hallway floor at midnight, even though that made no sense. The sound moved slowly from the far end of the hallway toward my room. I remembered what Mrs. Yanti told me earlier. Never try to peek outside. Part of me still didn't believe it, but somehow my body just obeyed on its own. I pulled the blanket over myself, closed my eyes, and tried to convince myself it was just my imagination from moving day exhaustion. The dragging stopped. Right outside my door. I didn't dare open my eyes. I listened to my own breathing, trying to stay as still as possible. Every second felt like an hour. Then, silence. No footsteps walking away. No door sounds. Just heavy silence, like something was still standing right there, behind that thin door, waiting. I don't know what time I finally fell back asleep. All I know is I woke up the next morning with my whole body aching, like I hadn't moved all night. Day 2. The next morning, I went down to the shared kitchen. hoping to grab breakfast and meet some of the other tenants. There was one guy, Fajar, who lived in room 10 and had been there 2 years. I asked casually, "Hey man, did you hear anything weird in the upstairs hallway last night?" Fajar stopped chewing. He stared at me for a long moment, then answered quietly, "You're in room 13, aren't you?" I nodded. "Next time you hear that sound, don't let your curiosity win. I'm serious." Now I was genuinely curious. "What's the deal with the room next to mine? Why is it padlocked?" Fajar paused like he was deciding whether to tell me or not. Finally, he spoke. "Before this place got split up into rooms like it is now, room 12 belonged to a seamstress. Her name was Mrs. Marnie. Old woman, but she was still sharp. Sewed clothes for the whole neighborhood. Her husband had passed years ago, and her kids never visited. And then, 10 years ago, they found her dead in her room. The way she was found was strange. She died hugging her sewing machine, like she'd just been working, and her heart gave out right there. But here's the part that really gets people. The neighbors said that for 3 nights before she was found, they could still hear the sewing machine running every night from her room, even though nobody had seen her leave that room for days. My skin crawled instantly. That room's stayed padlocked. Mrs. Yanti never rents it out again. She says her spirit's still trapped in there. The second night. I tried to sleep earlier that night, hoping the night before had just been a coincidence. But right at midnight, the dragging sound came back. This time it was clearer, closer. And what made it different from the night before, it wasn't just fabric dragging anymore. There was breathing, heavy, like someone struggling to breathe but forcing themselves to keep moving. I knew I should just stay still like the night before. But human curiosity is a cruel thing, guys. Sometimes it's stronger than fear itself. I slowly got out of bed, walked silently toward the door. I didn't open it. I just peeked through a small gap under the hinge, where the paint had peeled away and left a thin sliver to see through. And what I saw nearly stopped my breath completely. A pair of legs, pale, bluish, like legs that hadn't had blood flowing through them in years, hanging, not touching the floor, swaying gently in rhythm with the dragging sound I'd been hearing. Except now I realized it wasn't the sound of feet being dragged across the floor at all. It was the hem of the clothing hanging from those legs, brushing softly against the wooden floor every time the figure swayed. I backed away from the door as fast as I could, nearly tripping over myself from sheer panic. I clamped both hands over my own mouth so no sound would escape. A few seconds later, knocking, not on my door, on the wall beside it, the wall separating my room from the padlocked room 12. Knock, knock, irregular, like someone knocking on a whim, no pattern, no intention of asking for help. More like they were playing with something, or letting me know they knew I was there, listening. I sat on the floor hugging my knees until dawn, too scared to go back to bed, too scared to turn on the light. The next morning, with puffy eyes and hands still shaking, I went down to find Mrs. Yanti. I asked her directly, no beating around the bush. "Ma'am, the room next to mine, did what people are saying actually happen?" Mrs. Yanti wasn't surprised, like she'd been waiting for that question since the moment I moved in. "I told you not to look," she said quietly, almost like she was blaming herself for ever renting me that room. Mrs. Marnie, she was a good woman when she was alive, but she was so lonely toward the end. She sewed constantly, day and night, like if she ever stopped, she'd truly be alone. So why is she still there, now? Mrs. Yanti looked at me for a long moment. Because she never felt finished. Someone who dies holding on to their own work, sometimes their soul doesn't realize they're gone. She's still looking for someone to stitch, to keep her company. Those words sounded strange to me at the time, but 3 nights later, I understood exactly what she meant. I thought about moving out that same day, But I'd already paid a full month's rent, and I didn't have the money to move on such short notice in the middle of the semester. I told myself, a few more nights and I'll get used to it. Looking back, that was the dumbest decision I ever made. The third night. I tried to force myself to stay awake before midnight, so I'd be ready the moment the sound started. I double-locked the door, dragged a small dresser in front of it just in case, and turned on my phone flashlight beside my pillow. Right at midnight, the dragging sound came back, but this time it didn't stop outside my door. It came inside. I don't know how. The door was still locked, the dresser hadn't moved an inch, but the dragging sound was now inside my room. The lights went out suddenly. Not a power outage for the whole house, because I could still see light seeping in from under the door, from the hallway outside. Just my room's light had died, and from underneath my bed, I heard the sound of an old sewing machine, spinning fast, clack, 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 like it was chasing something, racing against time, racing to finish a stitch before the night was over. I didn't dare move, didn't dare look down at what was under the bed. I just lay there frozen, listening, praying silently for it to end. The sound of the sewing machine got faster, louder, until I could feel the vibration traveling through the bed frame, through the mattress, into my own body. Then suddenly, it stopped. Completely. A silence more terrifying than the noise itself had been. I waited a few seconds. Nothing. No sound at all. Slowly, I worked up the nerve to turn on my phone flashlight. And when the light hit my pillow was soaked. Not with sweat, blood. It hadn't just pooled randomly. It formed a pattern, a stitching pattern. Small, neat lines, like the marks left by a needle pierced over and over with the precision of an experienced seamstress, forming a crude embroidery across the pillow's surface. I jumped out of bed, my heart feeling like it would burst. I backed toward the small mirror mounted on the wall by the wardrobe, pure reflex since it was the farthest point from the bed. I saw my own reflection in the mirror. Pale face, cold sweat, eyes wide with terror. And standing behind my reflection stood the figure of a woman. Her skin was pale, almost gray, long hair partially covering her face. She stood perfectly still, too still for something alive, with both hands raised in front of her chest, exactly like someone holding fabric, ready to sew. I wanted to scream. I tried to scream as loud as I could, but no sound came out of my mouth. Because the moment I tried to open it, I felt something tugging again and again at my lips. Sharp, repeated. I raised my trembling hand to my own mouth, and I felt thread, black thread, stitched tightly, crisscrossed across my lips. Far too neat for something that had just happened in a matter of seconds. Like it had been there all along, and I was only just now noticing. The figure in the mirror didn't move, didn't attack, she just stared, like she was admiring her own finished work. My vision slowly went dark. Epilogue. To this day, nobody knows exactly what happened to Bhima that night. All Mrs. Yanti knows is that the next morning, room 13 was empty. Bhima's belongings were still neatly arranged. His laptop, his thesis notes, his bag, as if he were about to walk back in any minute. But he never did. Room 13 is padlocked now too, just like room 12 beside it. And if you ask the longtime residents of the boarding house, they'll tell you, sometimes past midnight, you can still hear the sound of an old sewing machine coming from that far end of the hallway. Working, never finished. Waiting for the next tenant who doesn't yet know the one rule that matters. If you ever hear something being dragged down the hallway after midnight, never try to peek outside.